The smaller you go, the more of a problem that is going to be. Unless you're able to travel regularly to your target country, if there is a target country, you're unlikely to get as many opportunities to practice them as with native speakers. But also, you're more unlikely to find other students to share your learning experience with. And that's going to be a lot harder as well to find a good teacher, if that's one of the ways that you worked. With these languages, you're pretty much on your own. So you're going to have to rely on whatever materials you can get your hands on. And then that's a whole different question. We all learn with different materials and we all have different techniques, but from my personal experience, I think it's best not to rely completely on just one course. None of them are perfect, and none of them are going to tell you everything that you need to know. There's a good selection offered by companies like Teach Yourself, Routledge, and Assimil, although I've never used the latter. And a brand new colloquial Yiddish has also just come out, so make sure you check that out. But while these courses will give you a strong basis in your target language, it's important to have a plan of where you're going to go afterwards. There are plenty of books, courses, and evening classes on offer all over the world for people who want to study advanced French or improve their German. But if your heart is set on a language like Armenian, it might seem like the end of your course is the end of the line. So this is where learning a small language starts to become really tricky. By no means is it impossible, but it's not going to be served to you on a plate. With them, you're going to have to be a lot more resourceful. Now, fortunately, we live in the age of the internet, which I think, as this conference proves more than anything else, so unused to hearing people speak their language that they tend to overcorrect you. They won't allow you to get a word wrong. And perhaps they might not even be used to hearing it spoken with a foreign accent, which might make it difficult for them to understand you. They might not even realise straight away that you're a foreigner. And so instead of adjusting to speak more slowly and enunciate more clearly, they might think that the reason why you don't understand them is because you can't hear them and just speak at you more loudly. Now, this can be damaging to your confidence as well, but it's something that as a language learner we have to learn to live with. Schreiben means. Are there any German speakers here, for example? Right. Tell me how you would put this into German.
To write something over something.
You're saying sich überschreiben?
Write too much.
Right, so let's look at sich überschreiben. Can anyone actually tell us what that means?
Write too much.
To write yourself.
To override yourself, right. Does that really make much sense? Like, oh, ich habe mich überschrieben. You don't really say that. So there we go. There's our sich überschreiben, which is what a German person might understand by sich überschreiben. Now this is where we start to put the Russian into the mix. How many Russian speakers are there in the room? Okay, so again, an exclusive club.
Переписаться.
How many of you might have heard of the expression in Russian, переписываться?
Yeah, to correspond with somebody.
Well, переписаться, put it in the short form. Which means, of course, to have correspondence with someone. And that is exactly what sich überschreiben means. And I'm going to show you how we've taken, basically, this Russian expression to have a correspondence with someone, which isn't even a verb that we even need to have, like in English, because we work other ways around it, and they made it in Yiddish with German words. So first of all, we've got the Russian word pisat, which means to write. From this, we have schreiben, which is the Yiddish for to write. Now, переписываться, we construct this in Russian first of all by adding the reflexive ending sia. And so in Yiddish, we do this as well by adding the Germanic sich. So now we've already got it as being reflexive. Then we have the prefix in Russian, piri, which means kind of like over, across. You use it to say things like move over to things. And the Yiddish speakers have found that to have a German equivalent, über, or in Yiddish, iber. So there we go, sich überschreiben. Now, maybe this doesn't excite you as much as it does me. Like, when I came across this, I thought this was awesome. Right? They're saying, oh, why is he like overriding himself? It's like, no, he's just writing to his sister. You know? And there's other words as well. I mean, you've got a wonderful word in Yiddish which is unterhören, which is like in German unterhören, but actually means to overhear. And which in German is to hear with, so mithören. But of course in Russian, when we want to say this, we'll say podslушать, which is to listen under. So in Yiddish again, we've got it, unterhören. Okay, maybe it's a niche thing. But another crucial feature of the language is the role played by words originating from Hebrew or Aramaic, which is called the Lashon Kodesh, or the Holy Language. They often have Germanic or Slavic synonyms, but the Lashon Kodesh words have much more depth of meaning and weight to them. I mean, after the Second World War, there was an active effort by Yiddish linguists and the Yiddish institutions to increase the frequency of Lashon Kodesh words and to try to distance the language from its Germanic origins for, obvious political reasons. So, for example, I mean, some Yiddish speakers would say like Stunde for hour, when there's actually a very good Yiddish word, shor, which is like the Hebrew sha'ah, which is now the accepted thing. And equally the same Yiddish speakers, some Yiddish speakers would say monat for month, when there's the Hebrew word chodesh, which in Yiddish is chodesh. So the challenge that you have actually when you're learning Yiddish, especially if you're not Jewish and you may not have come across a lot of these terms which can be used for religious purposes and those kind of things, is kind of getting your head around these, and also because they keep their original Hebrew spelling in Yiddish, although the pronunciation may have moved very, very distant from them. In fact, in every case it almost has, because you all of a sudden have the oi sounds and the chaz, and it's a bit of a nightmare, but you get used to it. But I mean, just before, because at the end of this I'd like to open up the floor to discussion. I mean, if you don't have questions and you just have answers, I'd still like to hear them. It would be nice to hear everyone's experiences and that kind of thing, but I'd just like to give you a little example of some Yiddish. This is a Yiddish poem that I've actually stolen from a talk by Dr. Barbara Henry of the University of Washington in a fantastic video she gives outlining the reasons why you might want to learn Yiddish. Go watch it. And it is called Sechs Shodas, or 6 lines. And here on the left I put it in English, and I've also given you a transliteration if you don't know the Hebrew alphabet. So the story behind this poem is that it was written by a man named Aaron Zeitlin, who lived in Warsaw. He was a Yiddish and Hebrew playwright and poet who was invited to New York in 1939 to oversee the production of one of his plays at the local Yiddish theatre. And while he was in the middle of his visit to New York, the war broke out. And he was unable to return to Poland, and he stayed in America for the rest of his life. While he was in New York, his family was killed, and the place where he's from disappeared. Which, I mean, is quite a sobering thought, to think that you can leave somewhere and it just vanishes. And yet you remain a part of it, and you're still living it, but it's gone. And this is what this poem is about. This poem is also about the role that Yiddish now has in a world where no one wants to speak it, no one thinks it's useful, and everyone is opting instead for Hebrew and English. This is about Yiddish's fight for survival in a world where no one needs it. So I'm just going to read it for you. Ich weiß, keiner darf mich nicht auf Ort der Eulen, mich, wer der Bettler, auf dem jiddischen Beseulen, wer darf Lied und noch dazu auf Jiddisch. Nur bloß das Hoffnungslose auf der Erde ist schön, und göttlich ist nur das, was muss vergehen, und nur hach Noah ist meridisch. So if we have the English, I know nobody needs me in this world. Me, the word beggar in the Yiddish graveyard. Who needs a poem, especially in Yiddish? Only the hopeless things on the earth are beautiful, and divine is only that which must pass, and only humility is rebellious. So if we just look at the language quickly, I just want to point out, we've got the word oilen twice to mean, firstly to mean word, and then in Bes Oilen where it means house of the world, i.e. graveyard. Oilen comes from, well, I've actually spelt it wrong, I'm so sorry. Oilen comes from the word in Hebrew, olam, which means world, and of course oilam is the Ashkenazi pronunciation of it. But if I can get out of the way of the projector here, we see the word erd, which is the Germanic word, which means earth. Now I just want to point out the different ways that they're used. Oilam here is a word full of character, full of meaning, full of life. It means far more than just the world that we live on. But erd literally does just mean the soil. So this is the kind of thing that is going on in Yiddish the whole time. We have words from Hebrew that mean so much, contrasted with Germanic and Slavic words that all have their different roles to play, which as a language learner is fascinating. And finally, I just want to, before we move to discussion, just concentrate on one line of this poem, which I think is fantastic, which is Nur bloß das Hoffnungslose auf der Erde ist schön. Only that which is hopeless is beautiful in this world. And I think that this is the message that I'd like to leave you with, the thought, really. I mean, because yes, Yiddish doesn't really have a use in your day-to-day lives. It won't help you find a job, and its future is pretty bleak. But there's something extremely beautiful about it. It's an absolutely fantastic language, and opens up a whole world to you that you may never have known about before. And that should be the reason that we'll encourage you to learn it, as well as other small languages that we have.
Well done, Alex.
Beautiful language. Actually, do you know what? I used to hear it in a park in North London quite a lot. There's a big Jewish community in North London. Whenever I went to the park, I can't remember what it was now, where it was exactly, and I used to hear Yiddish all the time. And it was like, oh my god, I can kind of get something. That's probably misunderstanding everything you're saying. Okay, we've got 10 minutes for questions before the last presentation. Who's hands up? Okay, I'm going to go here. You snooze, you lose. I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering, do you have any plans to learn Klingon?
No? I'm sorry, I'm not a Star Trek fan.
But the basis of that is that Klingon was, when William Shatner spoke Klingon, it was actually Yiddish.
Maybe, if anyone watches Game of Thrones.
That was the reason that I wasn't knocking Yiddish, I'm sure.
So first 2 quick points. I actually have a secular friend who speaks Yiddish as a native speaker, so maybe that's of some use for you. And the second thing, I just started learning Catalan, and so I was actually thinking earlier about how it would go when I probably will spend a weekend or 2 in Barcelona during the summer. So I'll let you know how that experience goes, whether people will switch to Spanish and English automatically, and I'll have the same war. And then I have a question. I lived in the Netherlands for a year in Utrecht, and when I was there, I arrived. I didn't speak any Dutch. And I remember there was just one cafe in the entire town where they would tolerate my attempts in the beginning. Everyone else would automatically speak to me in English. But this one cafe, they would always allow us to speak in Dutch. We obviously gave them a lot of business. I didn't like the food, but it was effective. And I recently returned to the Netherlands on a few trips to Amsterdam, and I was pleasantly surprised that people suddenly spoke to me only in Dutch. And I was wondering if you had also noticed, I know Richard speaks quite good Dutch as well, and whether you've noticed this phenomenon in the last decade and why you think that has happened. I haven't been living in the Netherlands, so I'm not sure if it's a political switch or what's behind this sudden openness to speaking more Dutch with foreigners.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true, and that's certainly something that Richard and I talked about in a video we made in Parma in Italy in November, is that suddenly you can speak Dutch, and they speak Dutch back to you, and they don't think it's weird. So, I mean, I can't really comment on what's going on in Holland socially, politically, etc., because, I mean, my trips to Holland are normally like weekend trips on the megabus. But something has happened, and I think people now are open to the idea of people learning Dutch. They're much more free about it. They'll let you make mistakes, and I think it's a really good thing, because obviously now people in Holland are really proud of their language, and they want people to learn it, and it's not just a secret code anymore. So yeah, I agree.
So, first of all, I found your talk was brilliant. I learned some fascinating things today about Yiddish that I didn't know, and you totally convinced at least me that it would be worthwhile to learning it. I just wonder, how do you feel about the opportunity cost? Because the time that you've spent learning Yiddish, you could have learned Hindi or Korean, and there's only that much time that a human can spend learning languages. So does it sometimes make you sad that there are so many that you didn't learn? Because you have to make a choice.
But why do we learn any language? Like, this is the big question, because for me, I know from the beginning it's never been that I've been collecting them. It's not like I'm a language collector. I learn the languages that are interesting to me, that I've got like a connection with, that I want to speak. I mean, I wouldn't learn Chinese just because it's Chinese, for example. And personally, I find like what Yiddish gives me and what smaller languages give me, and the effect that they have on the way that I can interact with the world around me is like makes everything worth it, and so I wouldn't say that it's like a wasted investment of time.
Okay, I have 2 questions. One, how do you deal with the idea that some language users or dialect users will consider you as very impolite if you suggest they are peasants and old culture and the low part of the society because you try to make fun of their language. This is the first language, first problem. The second is how do you distinguish between dialects which are so close that you don't know them, but the local people might be very angry if you make a slight misunderstanding. I would say something like Croat and Serbian or things like that. How do you deal with that? Have you a list of things you must avoid at any cost?
Okay, I think what I understand of what you're getting at is the idea that, like, when you're learning a language, you are suddenly entering a room where you don't really know anyone, and there's an awful lot of things that have been said before you enter that room that you may not know about and that you may not understand. So, for example, Serbian and Croatian, we all know sort of 25 years ago they were one language, now they're two, and don't forget it. The way that I think that you have to approach this is that if you're in a situation like that, you have to make it clear that you're an outsider. You're a foreigner, you're someone that's making an effort to learn the language. I mean, it's not something that I think I'd say very often, but I mean, maybe drop the accent, let them know. With this one, that you're not part of whatever it is that's going on in that country or that you don't know about, you're just someone who needs to buy a bus ticket. And if you stick to that approach, you shouldn't have any problems with either of the two things that you mentioned.
Oh, good point.
Okay, well, time is ticking on, so last question now.
So, in terms of somebody who's not Jewish who speaks Yiddish, Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State of the United States, whose family is originally from the Caribbean, I think Jamaica, he speaks some Yiddish because he grew up, I think, someplace in Brooklyn, and he worked for a Jewish furniture store. So, here you go. You can always tell people Colin Powell.
Exclusive club.
Yes. Maybe we will see Alex Rawlings as the future Foreign Secretary of the UK. We'll have that. So my question is that I know that there has been a revival of klezmer music, both in the United States and in Europe. Do you think that's helping people learn Yiddish or get interested in Yiddish? And are the singers
play the
of
clarinet.
this klezmer music, do they speak Yiddish, or are they just learning the songs, from what you understand?
I think so, definitely, and you're right that there is now a huge revival movement of Yiddish across all Jewish communities in the world, which is a fantastic thing, even in Israel, where it's been such a contentious issue for so long. And klezmer is a way that that's happening as well. And I'm not sure if the singers in the klezmer bands are necessarily native speakers of Yiddish, but a lot of the time they're maybe Jewish people whose parents or grandparents spoke it that have learnt it because they want to rediscover something of themselves. And they've also decided that becoming a klezmer singer and that kind of thing is a way of getting back in contact with their culture. And also klezmer music, I can't believe I missed it out, is an absolutely fantastic part of Yiddish and something which learning it will offer to you. And please go on YouTube and have a listen to some of the stuff that's there. It's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very, very much, Alex, and thank you for all your questions. I know that there's a lot of people with a lot more questions, and I hope you'll take the opportunity to find Alex during the breaks and ask anything that's important to you. Thank you very much. And now... sincerely for your participation and for making this conference what it is. And we really look forward to seeing you again tomorrow with some more great speakers, some more great questions, and some more fantastic multilingual conversations. Have a great evening. Group together, go out in groups, and enjoy Budapest.
Kill them.